Where is INSURTECH headed next? This is where indie agents own the answer. Welcome to the Vertafore Insurance Podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to another episode of the Vertafore Insurance Podcast. I am super excited to introduce a very special guest, somebody that I've actually had the pleasure of working alongside. This was before I came to Vertafore. I got to watch her build Margeaux Giles Consulting, which we'll hear more about in just a little bit. And she's recently launched a new venture called IRYS INSURTECH. Margeaux Giles, the CEO of Margeaux Giles Consulting and CEO founder of IRYS INSURTECH. Welcome to the Vertafore Insurance Podcast.
It's so good to see you again, Sid.
Always.
Honestly, very excited to come on the show. Yes.
Well, I'm honored that you were able to carve out a few minutes because I know you're at a conference and somehow you found this fantastic background, which honestly looks like it was made for you. I'm not going to lie.
I know. I'm going to steal this chair.
Right.
I don't know that yet.
Oh, that's not your chair.
No, it looks like it should be
me.
like a game, like an InsurTech Game of Thrones chair, shouldn't it? It's like red,
Totally.
Power color. Like,
Totally.
If you guys want to nominate me as queen, I will sit on the Iron Throne, okay?
There you go.
You know what? We do
do
need
that.
a queen of InsurTech. I feel like it could be Margo.
It could be Margo.
It could be.
All she needs is a
Could work
fiddle
up
and a
to that.
guitar.
That's what I'm saying. For those of you guys who can't see the quote, there is a fiddle and a guitar mentioned. So,
Yes.
okay, so Margo, tell me a little bit about. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's
Oh my
go.
God, which beginning?
Well,
There's so many.
Okay, all right.
That's awesome.
Let me narrow that down a little bit more. Tell me how you got into insurance.
Okay. So insurance, stumbled into it because no one grows up and is like, I can't wait to be an insurance agent. I stumbled into it.
This is true.
Very true.
Even though I was
It's like a
born
weird
in
story.
I was born into insurance, but I definitely don't think I.
This guy too.
Yeah, I don't know that I came out saying like I can't wait.
No.
No.
I tried to get away from it.
When's
as much
it my
as possible.
turn?
Yeah. Okay.
When's
So
it my
stumbled
turn?
in. How did you stumble in?
Stumbled in. So I would, I had a company when I was like 19. So I started a company early on in my career and had an exit when I was about 21 to Anheuser-Busch. And it was a like a pre-Uber situation. And so at the time, this was, I mean, I'm not going to date myself, but it was a long time ago. I'm not 19. So there was no concept of like ride share or gig economy. There certainly wasn't insurance that surrounded that. So part of my job was to secure, insurance for the company. And so I kind of got into it and got really interested in risk mitigation and like how that worked out. Because we were doing drunk driving prevention when I went to the restaurants and bars that we were working with, a lot of my talking points were around risk mitigation, like not leaving vehicles in the parking lot, not letting people drive home intoxicated from their bar. So it made sense that after that, I took a year off and went to New York City and did what a 21-year-old does after an exit.
Why not?
Lived my best life.
Nice.
But then, we'll leave that one off the podcast for now. But then when I got back, that's a whole another podcast. But when I got back, it was kind of a natural, segue into, okay, well, I have all these connections and I've been talking about risk mitigation. Let's become an independent agent. So I really started learning straight in the independent channel. Kind of went straight into the commercial lines, which, a lot of people do their entry in personal lines and then they kind of work up to commercial. And because of my background, I went straight into that. And then, just grew a book. I met my husband. We ended up buying the agency that we were working for and just started to grow over time. And obviously, when I got into the operations role, one of the very first things I was looking at in commercial insurance, this was 15, 16 years ago. Why do I have, triple copy carbon paper? Why are we scanning handwritten documents, right? And e-faxing them over to the carrier. So really delved into how we could like streamline tech and start looking at automation and just went out into the market and really just delved right into the InsurTech side. So that, I think that's kind of the early progression into how we got sort of sidetracked into InsurTech.
Okay. So how did you tell me about that tech journey. right? Where did you start?
The tech journey was wild.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to me about that. Where did you, because I'm assuming you started with an agency management system.
We did.
Okay, and at the
we
time,
actually was it.
That was it.
Wait, did you sell the agency?
There was no CRM.
Or do you still have the agency?
We are still partial owner of the agency, but it's under a private equity firm now. So we've got, I don't know if about 16 or 17 now under that private equity umbrella. And my husband is actually still the CEO of that vertical. So we're still like, I'm always still 1 foot in insurance.
That's really cool.
Because I'm in software, but everybody there thinks I'm an IT specialist. So they're like, my computer isn't starting. Can you help me fix the printer? And I'm like, okay.
Not me. Right.
You're the genius lab for your insurance agency, or the genius bar, or whatever.
I think that's really cool that you're still in the industry, though.
Absolutely.
Very much. Yeah. And I still write policies from time to time and, still answer questions, for some clients. So I'm never far removed from the insurance space, which I think really is segued in a lot to Go Giles and why that was so successful. But really, we started with an AMS like everyone else. At that time, there was no CRM. It was just like, we had great sales reps, and everything about their clients lived in their brain, right? And that is where it stayed. And hopefully nobody needed their brain, which obviously never happened because people get sick and they go on vacation. And it became really apparent that the customer data, even outside of the policy data, right, was really valuable to us as an agency. And I went on sort of a mission to figure out how you're going to capture all that data. Considering that AMS, typically and especially back then, really didn't have data fields or data sets around customer buying habits or personal information or relationship information. So a lot of it was done on spreadsheets. And then, went out into the wide world and said, okay, well, to solve some of this problem, we need a CRM. And then I dived into the HubSpots and the Salesforce and really got into that and kind of got sucked into the Salesforce ecosystem, right? So, which I think a lot of people did. I think about 5-6 years ago, it really came on the scene, and it was going to sort of be the panacea and solve everybody's issues. But I think we figured out quickly that it was still software, and it was still something that needed to be managed and built, and it wasn't sort of open it up and let it rip, and it was going to work great from day one. So we threw ourselves into that, and quickly realized that it was a whole new world of software had opened once we invested in that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, when you're doing the spreadsheets and keeping up the relationship management there, with your team involved in that, was that something they bought in pretty quickly on, or did you have to sell them on that? And what was that change management like?
Oh man, it was brutal. So, and it was really weird because we had the same divide that I think a lot of agencies had. We had really senior tenured agents who were like, this is how they do their job, and this is it. Like, I write it on my paper, and I don't even want to look at your software. Don't even try it. And then we had ones that were coming in, and they were really eager to use the tools because they didn't want to work extra hours, right? Like, they were trying to be super fast and efficient. Plus, I feel like they were using some of the software capabilities in their outside life. So, whereas maybe some of the more senior tenured agents still weren't shopping on Amazon. They certainly weren't streaming on Netflix at that time. So it was an easier transition. But yeah, it was brutal. We had a lot of sort of come to Jesus moments, on adoption. I think a lot of people have that same journey.
Oh yeah. Change management in agencies is not for the faint of heart. So,
well, no one talks about it. Yeah. Hear, like, when you get onto the tech side, change management, digital transformation, there's, you hire Deloitte and PwC, and you have these big, plans, these year-long spans of plans when you get onto the tech side. But, for the normal size brokerage or agency, they've never even heard the word change management. Right. Like, that's not even in their purview. Right. And so I think they are at a disadvantage from day one because they walk in and I think the expectation is you get a software, you turn the software on, you log into the software, and the software just goes.
Right.
And it's wildly inaccurate. There's so much more that goes into that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, let me rewind for a sec out of the change management conversation, because that's probably a podcast in and of itself that we could probably go down a ton of rabbit holes on, and we should at some point, because you probably have a ton of knowledge. Actually, we should do that. We should have Margo back on and talk about change management. Okay, so
noted.
Yes, check. So customer data versus policy data.
Yeah, the debate.
Let's spend some time on that, because I think a lot of agencies would probably say, well, my AMS has customer data.
Yeah.
So Margo, what are you talking about? Or you haven't seen my AMS, right? What
my filing cabinet, my glorified filing cabinet. Yeah.
What do you mean when you make that very clear line in the sand between customer data and policy data?
So for me, it's when I think about, because I was on a prevalent AMS for 8 years, and I managed, and I was the administrator for it. Mm-hmm. So when I thought prior to this, when I thought about customer data, it was like, you think primary contact, right? Like the person's information. It's like email, phone number, maybe some like ancillary work email and some addresses. And that is what most people think about customer data.
Right.
And what we kind of shifted towards when we started building out the tech for OIG, for the agencies, was that's great, but a person is more than phone number 1, phone number 2, email or physical address, mailing address.
Preach.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So like what other ancillary data do we need to actually make the connection, and not just to a policy, but to like the process of getting to a policy? Because there's all kinds of other data that you want to collect. And I call them personas, right? Like humans have personas. And if you think about it, I always use myself, because of course I'm like the most complicated being. Like I can't just do anything straightforward. So in my old AMS, I was listed as a driver on my husband's policy. So if like I called in to the agency and my little name popped up on the VoIP, all it would show was Margo, driver to policy X, and that policy had a value of 10,000, premium or something like that. It was a very low, it was a personal auto policy.
Right.
And so that is the only context that anybody at that agency had of me as a person.
Right.
What they weren't seeing at that time was, I'm the CEO of this company. At that time, we were investing in rental properties. I had 2 or 3 rental properties that we were working towards for Airbnb. I sat on the
all
board
of which are insurable opportunities for those listening.
And not even not even insurable opportunities. But I was having this conversation this morning here at Amplify Broker Tech Fest, which is when you get into like email marketing and you're talking about targeting campaigns. Right now we're seeing like the most successful email campaigns are just highly, highly personalized. Like this like template approach to email is not working. So how do I target Margo if the only information I have about her is that she's a driver on some policy? Maybe I have her car and maybe I can glean some information from that. But if I don't have a place to register Margo's personas, which are technically like relationships, which by the way, that's CRM, customer relationship management. That's 100%. Literally what it stands for. If like, how do I represent all of Margo's hats or personas that and how she's related to all these other entities, which by the way are also insurable, but they also can predict risk. I mean, like going further down just from brokers, if you're talking about what a carrier might understand, like why do carriers want to see a broker CRM? Well, I mean, all of those activities, everything I do creates a risk profile for me, not just on what I want to buy, but also how insurable I am. And so I think there's this massive chasm of missing data about the people that are interacting with us to buy insurance. And I think if we don't fix that, somebody's going to fix it.
Yep.
And the brokerages that really embrace that and start to truly understand their clients, they're going to get that sticky clients that don't leave over a $20 premium increase. And that's what it's what's happening in hard market.
Yes.
So it's critical, I think, right now.
But I think also the other part of that is your persona hangs out other people within your persona.
Exactly.
And that also helps within that kind of marketing as well.
So what we found is it helped us, we ended up developing a niche. So even though we were still doing it on Excel and handwritten, because at the time we didn't have a place for it, we ended up identifying that we had this weird niche in telecom. So we had done we had a couple people that had come in through construction, because we were construction heavy agency. And we realized that we had like 3 or 4 of these guys that did like pole work, like in-ground cable installation, directional drilling. And we kind of called them up and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, how do you get, like, where do you work? Who do you work for? Like, can we help you mitigate some of your risk? And just by doing that one thing, we were able to identify, we had this like huge, we call it the everlasting gobstopper. It's, we call it the agency, because it ended up being a lead source for us that made millions of dollars. And we would never have been able to find that group of people, like you're talking about, like understanding their profile and where they worked and making those connections, like, oh, we actually have an opportunity here, without doing that. There's no way we would have figured it out. And we ended up becoming so specialized that working through the process of becoming an MGA just for that particular piece of business.
Wow.
So it was critical for us. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I moved out of a rental situation into a home ownership situation. And I remember thinking, like, why doesn't my insurance agent know that I'm on Zillow and I'm on realtor.com
all day, like a psycho, right?
Yeah.
Because we were
100%. And, you know, I mean, at some point, right, there's a relationship that insurance agents often make with the realtors and the mortgage lenders and all that kind of stuff, right? But did my insurance agent know when I specifically started to go from a rental situation into a home ownership situation? And why wasn't I getting that, like, white glove service where it's like, hey, we know that, and, you know, I was about the age too, where I was looking into it, right?
You were in a demographic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
have you thought about, or even predictive, like, have you thought about, we know you're renting.
Yes.
You have a renter's policy with us, and you're, you know, we think that are you looking for a home? It's a good time to buy. Can we help you? Like that.
Or even if you knew the contract, when does your apartment contract run out? You know, did you sign a 1 year, a 2 year? If you knew those kind of things, it'd be easy to keep up with. Hey, your apartment comes up
100%.
in 2 months. Have you started looking, or have you been looking?
See, but that data is buried in an Accord form.
Right.
So, like, you know what we
Right.
probably have that data somewhere. It's just not in a database that we can report on. So it's probably sitting in an application or some random place that's not been digitized.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It is crazy. And I think there's, you know, part one to this conversation, which is, okay, your team is going to be collecting information about your customer at any given moment, when they're on the phone or through Accord apps or whatever it might be. There's also a wealth of information out there about what your customer is doing that other people are tracking, right? So Journaya is a company that can tell you when your client is on competitor websites, for example. But we have even if we wanted to today, right? Even though Journaya exists, this is the craziest part about this whole situation. Even though they exist, they're at insurance conferences, right? They're even integrated with some INSURTECHs I know. The question is, like, is an insurance agent ready to ingest that type of data into their processes, right?
It's usually no. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
They're not.
Fair. So, like, so I just, you know, it's funny because if you go on Google Trends and you compare agency management system, so what Google Trends does, for those who don't know, is you can put in keywords and it will show you trend data. It'll show you how many people. You can limit it to certain countries, you can limit it to certain, you know, states, certain zip codes, right? And so you can see in the US, for example, between 2015 or 2003 and 2023, over the last 20 years, right? How many people were searching agency management system, and then how many people were searching CRM, and then how many, and you can dial in and say, you know, I want to look at just the insurance agent space, right? And then how many are searching agency management system versus customer relationship management system, or AMS versus CRM. And it's insane. Literally the line, and for those of you guys who are listening to the podcast, imagine I'm drawing a hockey stick that just like keeps going, right? Because it's just a debate right now. People don't understand what is the difference between these two systems. And so we're still trying to conceptually figure it out. Meanwhile, Amazon can get me packages in 24 hours and my fridge tells me what my,
Your fridge tells you you're missing milk. It's like, you
Yeah.
need milk. I'm like,
And-
you are intrusive. Fridge.
Right.
Like, that's,
You are.
Yeah.
and then Amazon, which owns Whole Foods, is like, hey, do you want me to deliver that for $52 without you even having
Yeah.
to think about it? And I'm like, oh, you know what?
I kind of do want you to do that.
No, Sid, no, I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyways, so how
Or even more, going back to that, people even confuse the two. They think they do the exact same thing. You talk about they don't
Yes.
know which one to get.
Yeah,
A lot
they
of them
don't understand
say,
the difference.
yeah, like I already have that in my AMS, or I already have that in my CRM, and they're two totally different situations, and people just get them confused, or they think they already have one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that goes back to, I think, if you look like historically, we started with, and I do call it AMS and BMS, because I'm going to call it BMS because I'm here in Canada, and that's what they call it up here, a broker management system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they do. And I'm like, so many acronyms. I already have like 1,000 in my brain for insurance. I'm going to learn some new ones. But I think historically, they really were treated like more of a filing cabinet, like for lack of a better, term.
A digital filing
cabinet. It was a digital file. It was just a place to house a policy and its status and maybe its premium, and then eventually moved into service. So things like accounting, like can I do my general ledger and stuff, and it kind of kept growing this direction into the service, because there is so much that we need to do as agents that I think also gets overlooked on the service side. That it's almost, and then at the same time you have like full CRM systems like HubSpot and Salesforce that are coming on the scene, and there's Pipedrive, there's a million other ones that Zoho, whatever it is. And so they were working sort of this direction. And then you have this weird gap in between. And insurance is just really one of those industries that is poorly served by the gap, because we have renewal. So because we have ongoing process. So like, if you're e-commerce, so like if I go on your website and you're tracking all of my customer stuff, and then I buy a shirt from you, like I'm not going to buy that same shirt from you over and over again every year. So, they're building systems for that sort of one-time use transactional commerce. And we're not like that. And so people don't realize that insurance is cyclical. It's not linear. And I think we've talked about this too. Like there are some industries that are linear, and then there's some that are cyclical. And if you do not have a tightly coupled CRM to AMS, right? And you're not tracking that all the way through its life cycle, then you're losing half your data's over here, half's over here. And so what people have to do is they build a data lake, or they put some crazy analytics like a Power BI or Tableau, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to aggregate it back again, and then run some kind of analytics so they can try and see what the customer life cycle really was. And I've been a part of many of those builds. I've built those integrations. I've run those analytics. And even in the best of scenarios, they're not the same as having the data set in a single big data warehouse that you're running this analytics off of in one place. It's a lot.
Yeah. So talk to me about like let's take it. So people think of these as two different systems, right? Okay, I have an AMS. Okay, I have a CRM. Let's just talk about functionality, right? So here we have this group, this category of functionality we call the agency management system, policy data, servicing, and then you have this category of CRM and customer data and the customer life cycle, and it's cyclical, not linear. So in your brain, like, do these things become one in right? And here's why I ask.
In the future?
Yeah, and here's why I ask, because so Catalyst did a study in 2022. They said, you know what, on average we're seeing, and there were about 400 agencies, so we know, there's 40,000 agencies out there. This is a very small segment of them, but the study showed that of those that they surveyed, on average, 6 different solutions, technology solutions, right? 2023, 8 different. And I'm curious what 2024 is going to be. Are we going to plateau here? Are we going to, right? And so even like at Vertafore, we hear about a lot of people who are looking for that all in one, right?
Yeah.
Looking for that, hey, I just need it all to work together, right? And that's kind of where we're going with Agency One and whatnot. But like, how do you think about the function from a functionality standpoint? Like, is there a world where it just becomes like AMS 2.0? Does AMS go away and CRM becomes the thing?
Or maybe we call it BMS like they do.
Yeah, do we go Canada?
We call it BMS.
And then say A at the end?
Style?
Like,
I think we go Canada style. We just call it BMS and we just reinvent it all. And then they call it AMS.
We're just rebranding it. We're going to rebrand it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I think we're already seeing in the market the resonation of the CRM and AMS in one place. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're already seeing some of these pop up in that general direction. So my opinion is, personally, moving forward, we'll have a system that does that one sort of platform. Mm-hmm. I don't, however, subscribe to the idea that one software can do all of the things at all the time, right? Because there is a point of diminishing return where your software gets so large that it's unmanageable, and then you're talking about how do you work in agile and how do you turn the Titanic around? You can't. And so I don't believe that the systems of the future will own all workflows across all things. I think that we'll end up seeing things like, the customer makes perfect sense that it's integrated back in. Like this customer, the habits, the buying habits, that directly correlates to a product that's being sold, and then we can see that life cycle. That to me makes perfect sense. But if you talk about like ancillary things that we're seeing come to the marketplace, I call them point solutions. So INSURTECHs that provide these very specific added values, right?
Yep.
And I don't think there's ever going to be a company that's going to own that like end to end. And I see those being the future being, you have the arc, where I call it the arc, right? You have like the place where you have a system of truth. This is where our data lives. We've got the data we need to collect, whether it's customer data, policy data, risk data, it lives here. And then we can do things like layer on a generative AI that we're not proprietarily building, right? Or a really cool analytics function, or some type of, there's a million, an application or a web plugin for my agency website. Like all of those things make perfect sense that they would live in tightly API, hopefully based connections, or even maybe in the future, not even API, something even faster and better. That it's so big and so much that we're not seeing another like monopoly conglomerate that can't really keep up with market demands.
I see it kind of like my Hulu, ESPN, Disney bundle. You can get them all bundled. So maybe you have 3 or 4 different technologies do different things, and you can bundle them together and have them together. But I love that you brought up the Titanic, and you talked about from like how do you turn around the Titanic.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, it could be a fleet of speedboats instead. Instead of having that one big. I think that's why. For us, Agency Zoom was such a sexy product for us. Can I say sexy on this show? I just did. But
you can say it. You just
that
did
way,
it.
Because Agency Zoom is a speedboat and it's able to move, and we've got our other products, 16 things that we sell here, but they're just a fleet of speedboats instead of trying to be one big Titanic, as you mentioned, because we all know what happened there.
Yeah. And but the key is that they all have to, like, everybody has to agree that that's the way that we're going to move forward. Like, brokers still need to understand that they have the power. One, they have the power because they have the data. And I don't think any broker I've ever spoken to truly understands the power they wield if they were collecting this data. Like, collectively as a group, we could track carrier appetite before carriers could track carrier appetite, right? Like we have so much data amongst, especially on the independent side. We're dealing, our agency, we've got like 140 appointments between all our agencies, regionals, MGAs. Think about, I could track response times on all of those things. I can track how well they service, what their claims process is like. Are they paying claims? And then I can use all of that data to direct my clients to the best place. And I don't think brokers really understand how much they hold if they were to sort of all agree that collecting data is worth the extra 10 minutes, right? And it's worth the us first adopters, us agents and brokers that are like, okay, we're going to do this, even though we know it's going to be hard, we're going to make this change. Like, if they could come together and come to a general consensus, then we could dictate how those speedboats work and how they work with each other and who they work with. And I think that that's really critical moving forward, that brokers, they kind of need to unify around a voice and say like, no, we're not going to do the things we've been doing previously because it's not in our benefit anymore.
Yeah. What how do you get to that world, I guess, right? Like this is like,
hard work.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Future state, right? But like what does
Yeah.
that look like for a broker today? Like how do they start walking down that
Going
path?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my big ones is becoming literate, like understanding that tech vetting, right? Like going through the process of, like, there's some work that they have to do. They have to educate themselves, and they have to be willing to listen, and they have to be willing to try new things, which, oh my God, how risk adverse are we as just like as an industry?
I know.
It's like I hear it a lot. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'm like, yeah, but it's like super broken. Like, you're real broken. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's not like everything's peaches and roses and now you want to level up. It's like, you can't get a COI out in more than 36 hours. That's a problem. Right? You know what I mean? That's broken in 2023. So one, we have to identify the early adopters, and Simon Sinek, I love this quote that he did. He talks about, and I can't remember if now I'm going to blank on it. It's like the law of diffusion or something, where he talks about the bell curve, and he talks about how inside a company, how they roll adoption out, what's most successful. And it's identifying those people that are willing to put the work in early, and you get them bought in, and then they lead the way and they kick that bell curve up. And then, those so trying to appease in any change management situation in any company of any size, trying to appease those like late adopters, the ones that will only change if they are forced to change in the beginning of a change management process, is not a good strategy. You have to find the people within your company that are interested in learning. They want to be educated. They have like an innate inertia around them. They want to learn how to use technology, and you champion those people internally to help you with that vetting and with that adoption. And then over time, you bring in, it's a slow process. Then you bring in, once you found something you guys all rally around, then you bring in the bigger part of the bell curve, and then they get bought in. And then finally at the end, you like drag along that agent that just doesn't want to change. But at that point, they're so bought in and invested. That's you have a positive change process, but it all starts with, identifying those personalities within the agency itself. And then you have to champion those people. You have to give them time in their day. You have to give them resources in their day to help them get to that point. And I think that's probably the most critical thing they can do, is like a step one.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, let's be honest too, right? Anytime you introduce the concept of change, it's not going to be easy. It's scary. Yeah, it's scary, and there's going to be a little bit of work involved. But, I think you have to ask yourself as an agent, why am I in this business? Why am I an owner instead of a producer? Why am I an owner instead of a service person, right? And part of your answer could be, well, I looked into it because I was born into it. Or part of it could be I was in the right place at the right time. But, at the end of the day, it really is that the only way that the model survives is if the people who are within the model continue to push and innovate. Right. And so you have to, I just say that, and I know I probably sound like a broken record to some.
Preach it.
Right. But like, it has to be said. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary.
We talked to a couple, because I did a lot of market research myself, and I'm the biggest question we always get is like, these agents are never going to change. Like, they don't care. They're just not going to change. And I think a lot of it comes around the fact that, if you look at the demographic, it typically skews a little bit older, especially the ones that are at this point that are owners. So I'm looking at like the ownership, makeup. And, they've worked 20, 30 years. This has worked for them. Like they have 30 years of experience backing up their, aversion to technology. They built a huge business without that worked until about 2 years ago. And until we started to see things like AI, and I hate saying AI because I feel like AI all the time. But whereas, like previously it was like, oh, you got a new customer portal. Okay, then we might see sales jump 20%. That was a really great implementation of a customer portal, right? Or we put an online form on our website, and now we're getting a lot of leads, and we're doing a lot of Google ads or Facebook ads, and it's funneling to this, and that's working. 20%, 30% increase. When you talk about the effects of AI, it's not going to be 20%, 30%. It's going to be thousands of percent, right? So you're training a workforce that's basically infinity large to go out and tackle a market. And so the ones that are sitting there and maybe they're 10 years from retirement, 15 years, they're comfy, but I caution those people. I'm like, let me tell you something. If you think that you're going to compete against the agency down the street in 10 years with pen and paper, you won't be here. And those companies are not going to come offer you a great M&A buyout. Okay. They're just going to steal your customers. They're going to put them on robocalls and they're going to take them without paying for them. So you built, it's true that you built 20-year nest egg and you think it's safe and it's not safe.
So
it's not safe anymore.
Where I was about to say before you said that was, we've been saying this, or I've been saying this for probably 8 to 10 years now. If you don't start adopting some of these things, you're going to get left behind. But I know of agencies right now that don't have a management system. They don't have a CRM. They still work off of filing cabinets. And I'm like, totally proving my theory wrong. And then you come out strong with that statement of 10 years from now, you won't be. But where in that point in time do we finally start seeing them left behind? Because right now they're still able to survive in this place. Like my father, 80 years old, still slinging insurance. Doesn't even have a computer. I mean, he comes to my office and uses mine. I mean, like, I still type emails for my father. He's 80 years old to this day, still selling insurance. And I'm binding policies.
My mom isn't 80.
But still, when do we leave them behind?
Yeah. So my mom she's not 80, but she would kill me. She's in her 60s. She's in her 50s. Right, Mom? And she works at our agency.
Right, Mom?
And she's our commercial manager, right? And I it's the same thing, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, but now I'm watching, the speed in which some of these things are being requested. A lot of it with the hard market too, like what's being requested of us as agents, the hoops that we're having to jump through. It's not just, okay, I'm just going to go to Nationwide's portal and type it in and get my quote because that's what I've been doing for 5 years. Good luck. You can't do that now. Those markets are closing. The restrictions are getting tighter. The documentation that you need to bind these policies is getting more and more intense, and all the things that you need to provide. And so I think in the last, like I said, 2 years, we've started to see this strain where someone that's like my mom, that is same thing, likes to use her pen and paper, and she's really good at it, is starting to really struggle as far as managing those types of policies that she's writing. And this is on the commercial side.
And I also think as the buyers get younger, I think that's going to help it a lot too. With as you said, the white hairs that are selling now and the older demographic that's selling now, the experienced agents, they attract more experienced customers. So I think once we get younger, that's going to help some of that. I was just interested in your thoughts on that as you were talking down that road.
I think it's death by 1,000 paper cuts too.
Sure.
Right.
It's exactly what it is.
It's not, and that's why it's so hard to see it and say like, well, these guys don't have an agency management system today, so therefore, they're making it work. I don't know. I still see people walking around with wired headphones, and I wonder like how that.
I used some on the plane today. Come on now.
What?
What is this?
Well, these are necessary wires. These are legit headphones.
Those are needed.
Yeah.
Well, we can't rule out M&A either. So like, we can't really talk about, is it really successful though? Because I know personally, private equity firms, like big ones that are coming into the U.S. market, even from other countries, and they're just gobbling those guys up. And they're buying them, and they're not letting them stay on pen and paper. They're getting them on an AMS, right? They're putting them. They have to digitize it. You're a PE firm, and you've got 150 agencies. You can't run a successful business. One, if they're all on multiple systems, and two, if half of it's in a filing cabinet, in a storage room. So while it seems like, well, that agency is flourishing now, if you look overall at the trend, those agencies are being gobbled up like nobody's business. Yeah. And they're not allowed to stay on pen and paper when they get gobbled up like that.
Yeah, actually, there's, at Vertafore, we provide the software technology for like 98% of the top 100 brokers. So I hear a lot about strategically what's going on there and what the movements and trends. Most of them right now are focused on how to not be operationally blind in a world where they have a lot of these big brokers have sort of let their independent agent members be truly independent, which I think from a strategic standpoint makes sense, right? Because then everybody sort of has their own way of doing things, and so there's sort of a, it sort of works, right? Yeah. But at the same time, how do I see from headquarters which agencies are struggling so I know how to help them?
You can't.
How do I see? Yeah. How do I see? Yeah. So I've got to make sure that and the thing is, like, they all know each other's doing it. So now it's kind of a race to see who can do it first, because whoever figures out the best model is going to, hit that moment of scale. Love what you heard? Listen, don't stop here. We know you don't want to. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube if you love watching, and get notified as soon as new episodes come out weekly. Let's go.